I'm Satpal Singh, and today is August 3rd, 2014. I was 33 years old, Amritsar. I was teaching at Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar. I used to teach in Guru Nanak Dev University, and I used to pass through Amritsar cantonment every day on my way to work. And I saw a build-up of tanks and other armored vehicles over several weeks preceding to the attack. Needless to say, we had no clue that an attack was coming. The first thing related to the attack that came our way was the day before the actual attack. We were shopping late evening for groceries and suddenly heard that there was going to be an imminent curfew starting I think 9 or something around that, and we had to rush back home. We did that, and then next day we started hearing on the radio and from the grapevine that an attack was just in the process. Then after that, when the actual attack occurred, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਗੋਲਾਬਾਰੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ, when there was a lot of shelling and so on, from a rooftop, which would be about, my guess is about 3 miles or so, we could see the flashes coming out of the shelling and so on. That was our first initial things. I used to go to the Darbar Sahib area quite often, and prior to the attack on the 1st June itself, when a good amount of, I think, bullets were sent Darbar Sahib way, there was shock, of course, and people prayed that not much damage is done and not many people die, but basically people were quite stunned. So during the shellings, of course, we heard a lot of noise and a lot of sometimes what we would in late evening or at night, there was one night I remember particularly, we would hear a lot of noise building up in a particular direction, and then there would be a huge explosion followed by screams and wails, and then that would slowly die down. And after some time, some other direction, a similar thing would happen. Our interpretation was that people were gathering around, or trying to go towards the Darbar Sahib probably, and they were being shelled. That was our interpretation at that time. One particular instance that occurred with us, our older son was 4 years old. He got very sick. He was running a fever of about 105 degrees, and we didn't have medication at home. The doctor we could go to was about a mile away, and it was very tight curfew, and going out we would be risking our life. Staying at home we would risking his life. So we had to make a choice. We took the option of taking him to the doctor, put him on a bicycle carrier at the back of the main seat, and Narendra, my wife, and I, we went together, hoping that the family being together would be safer. So throughout the main road that we crossed, the paths would be about half a mile or a little more. We had there was nobody on the road at all. We had a few armored vehicles at separated at distances. Throughout the time when we were on the road, the person standing in the armored vehicle but standing up had his gun pointed at us, and as we moved, the gun kept track of us with his hand on the trigger. and when we went out of his range, then the next armored vehicle would pick us up and just track us with their gun pointed at us, their hands on trigger. We had to do that. We couldn't keep take risk with our son's life. Fortunately, they were kind enough not to shoot us. Personal family member, we used to have very close friends living in that area. On the 1st of June itself, one of our very close friends, he used to work at a bank, and he was in the evening, he came back from the bank, and he was just looking outside his window when a sniper just shot him dead. Was BBC and Voice of America, and the news were quite limited. So we didn't have much idea. It was only after the very tight curfew was relaxed that we started knowing a little bit about it. We went upstairs where a whole lot of bullet holes were there. We saw in general damage to the complex and the building. So we had a lot of chatter in the community. There were people who would taunt us. A lot of people would taunt us, saying, "Darbar Sahib ki halat wada." And there were quite a few people who were sympathetic. So this was a mixed range of feelings. People were talking about the truckloads of bodies that were sent to various cremation grounds, stories about people who had died in their houses but could not move out the bodies, and the bodies kind of starting to go bad. People who were involved in earlier had shops around the houses, around the Darbar Sahib complex. They told about how much difficult it was for them to even go not only to their shops, but they're in their houses or get out of the houses for a long time. So there were a lot of such things. Yes, we kept living there. We didn't have any issue. Considerable chatter about not wearing black and blue turban or kesari turban. There were chatter about not having, books in your houses, which just talked about Sikhi and Amrit, and a lot of people were worried about those things, and a lot of people actually ended up burning their, even simple books that would talk about the importance of Amrit, or their, black and blue turbans, which was really very sad that they had to go to that extent. I had gone to Hyderabad for an interview. 31st of October, I was to take a train back. In the morning, I was in the library and had somebody visit her and talk about having heard about Indira Gandhi having been shot. The main news was that she had been shot at and she was in the hospital. So there was some brief conversation for a few minutes. The night went fine. In the morning, we stopped at a station. The train stopped at a station. We got out for tea, coffee, etc., as we usually do. What we saw was a small news item in a newspaper, which was buried deep inside a third, fourth page kind of thing, very small, a couple of inches column, that there was some disturbance in Delhi that had the previous evening, that had been addressed and there was no problem. And so we felt comfortable that there was not much that had happened, and whatever had happened, I think a couple of very small stations, and we didn't think much of it. There was a discussion among people who were on the tracks what were happening. We were still inside the compartment. At that time, there were some murmurs that Sikhs were being attacked. So we were concerned. Still didn't think much about it. Everybody assured us nothing would happen. Don't worry. There were 2 people from the army who were traveling with us in that compartment, and they assured us. They said, Sardarji, if anything happens, we are with you. Don't worry at all. So we were reassured about that. So what was happening was that these people who were beating up people, who were beating up Sikhs, they were coming from compartment to compartment and singling out Sikhs one by one and beating them up. So when they came to our berth, our section, by that time we had nowhere to go. There was no escape. There was absolutely nothing we could do except for some useless cocoon we could make around us, and that was to lie. This was late evening, lie down on our berths, on our sleeping places, and cover ourselves with bed sheets. It's no protection. We realized that, but what can you do? Hoping they would not recognize that there were Sikhs lying on us. So I was on the top tier, and the person below me was also a Sikh. He was in the Central Reserve Police Force. It's one of the paramilitary forces in India. They removed his bed sheet, and he immediately said, please don't harm me, don't hurt me. I'm actually from, my father is a Pandit, I'm from a Hindu family, I'm the oldest son in the family, and therefore they made me sick. And this used to happen. They left him, and then they suddenly yanked off my bed sheet, and a quick thought flashed my mind, maybe I can say the same thing. I couldn't come up to say that. So I got down, they got me down, and very surprisingly, very politely, the leader in the group, these are all young boys, very politely he said, Sardar ji, apna chashma utar dijiye. So I took out my glasses, put them on my berth, and there was a complete silence for about few seconds, maybe 4 or 5 seconds. Nobody did anything. They stared at me, and then everything started. So first they yanked off my turban, then the crowd, it must be around 20-25 strong, and the place was very crowded because the main target was my head. So they kept hitting my head with punches, and a lot of people started pulling my hair. What worked to my advantage was that this was a very crowded place. Those berths, people who've been in India. So I didn't fall down completely on the ground. I was still like a doll, rag doll being, punched around. So 2 of them sat with their back to the wall on that side, so that their legs could be straight at a higher level, somewhere about chest level, or between your hip and chest level. So that was the height at that time where my head was. So they started giving very direct punches to my head from that angle, very forceful punches, which I didn't realize at that time, but later on I realized that one of the punches hit me in the ear to the extent that my ear was ruptured, eardrum was ruptured. I had a lot of bumps on my head and so on. I was trying to save my head for two reasons. One is, in general, wherever you're getting punches, you would save that. The second thing is, I would say, it's a strange coincidence that my field of research in science is neuroscience. So, I knew what happens when your brain gets damaged. I had actually witnessed two instances, in the sense that after some time I lost my consciousness. I must admit, another useless thing. Eventually, I lost my consciousness, and they dragged my body. This is obviously my inference. They must have dragged my body and thrown it on the tracks. So I don't have an idea how long I was gone, but it would not have been too long, because the train was still there when I regained my consciousness. And there was a kind person who immediately, as he was standing next to the door, he saw me move a little bit, and he immediately pushed me, helped me push back into the train. He said, "Sardar ji, get into the train, otherwise ye patron se maar denge tumhe." So as I was getting back into the train, I saw on the platform, which was next to the track, that there were hundreds of people standing on the platform with stones to throw at anybody, and those would be the railway's track stones. Backtracking, when I was being beaten up, none of the people in that compartment, they helped me. Even those two army men who were sitting next to me and who were reassuring me that they would help me, they just kept sitting. Policemen outside the compartment, they kept on encouraging and coaxing the attackers to not leave me or any Sikh. So they were saying things like, "Maar do sale ko, inhone hamari maa ko maar diya, inko chodo nahi, kisi ko nahi chodo." So these were being shouted by the policemen who were standing outside. So in any case, I came back into the compartment, and by that time these people had gone on to other compartments to kill others and so on. So I came back and I realized, and somebody, the conversation started, and I realized that people who were in the army uniform, they were not being attacked. Although it turned out to be wrong later on, but this was the impression I got. So I asked these two army men, I said, "Could you help me in a simple way?" It's very simple. By this time we had started hearing about what was happening in Delhi. So I said, I'm not going to survive this. I can't get down here because people would kill me here. If I keep on going in the train, I would not survive again. So can you lend me your uniform? And their answer was very clear. They said, "Sardar ji, we really feel for you, but we cannot do that because that's against the army protocol. We cannot lend you your uniform." I said, "This is an emergency. As soon as I reach Delhi, I'll return it to you. Even if I cannot do that in Delhi, when I reach home, I'll mail it to you." But that was not to be of any effect. They did suggest something to me. They said, "Sardar ji, you have a very simple solution and we can help you with that." And that was to cut my hair. They said, when you reach Delhi, we are not the ones to tell anything about you, and nobody else would know that. So that was their only suggestion. And then I did think about it seriously, but I couldn't do that. So then I went, so then what happened, they suggested something else. In these compartments, there is a smaller sub-compartment which is lockable, which is meant to be ladies' compartment. There was nobody there. It was completely empty. They said if something happens, why don't you just go inside and lock it from inside, you'll be safe. This was another cocoon which was not going to help me. But at least I would have some peace of mind. So I went there. Very flimsy latch that latches it, I latched it. So then I started thinking about it. That's the first time I realized that I had a lot of bumps in my head. I also realized that my eardrum had been punctured. What was a huge consolation to me was that I was not only alive, but also, at least as far as I could see, I didn't have any cognitive issue, that I was able to think, my head had not, at least I had not sustained brain injuries to the extent that I would not even know what was happening around me. So I stayed there for a while. By this time I had heard en route to Delhi I would either be burned alive once we reached there, or they would, hack me to death or lynch me or something like that. It was very clear that I would die. The only thing which was not clear was how, and whether it would be an hour or 2 or 4 time frame, I had no idea. So I reconciled to that. It's difficult to reconcile to it. Gave a final thought to what I could do. My options, including cutting my hair and so on. So then I just made a decision. I stood up. So I stood up and said my own last prayer. Where it may seem strange to some, I prayed for the people who had beaten me up. I prayed for their mandi shanti, peace in their mind. I prayed for people who were feeling that hateful. I prayed for my family. I felt very serene, rather than feeling any remorse, or I had no. So then what happened? The train went on and stopped at Gwalior. At Gwalior station, the train stopped for a few minutes, whatever their scheduled stop is, 10, 12, 15 minutes, whatever it is. At that time, just before the train was to start moving again, I was in that small compartment. I heard somebody tapping with something that would sound like tapping the floor with sticks, and saying, if there were any Sikh from the army in that compartment, they wanted to get them out because otherwise they would be in danger when they moved to Delhi. So I was listening to all this, and I had no clue whether this was a ruse to get people out or this was a real thing. And also they said only about army Sikhs. So while I was weighing all this, I heard from outside somebody saying, there is a Sikh in this sub-compartment also, why don't you take him out also? And I heard a knock on my door saying, Sardarji, come out, otherwise you'll be in danger later on. So I had to make a split-second decision. I had no clue what was happening, whether it was right or dangerous. So I just came out. By that time, the train had started moving. These people had gone. By the time I came out, I didn't have time to pick up my luggage. I just picked up one of the small bags I had out of a couple of them. and I decided to jump out of the moving train. This was just leaving the station, so it was still on the platform. They have an army facility there at the station, so we were there. They registered us, and I asked them for what's going to happen. They said, we cannot help you, we cannot protect you, we cannot give you shelter. We don't have orders from the government to do that. The only orders we have from the government are to get the army Sikhs in army out and protect them, so therefore we cannot do that. And we don't have orders and we can't move without orders. So this was around 2 o'clock at night, early morning, 2 o'clock. And what can you do? You can keep on pleading, which I kept on doing. So then I asked them, I said, okay, tell me what's my fate. They said, your fate is clear. And we actually gave shelter to 2 Sikhs. We kept them with us to protect them. There was a crowd of about 40 or 50 or so, thereabout. They gathered and they had sticks and stones, and they said that we must hand over those Sikhs to them, otherwise they would burn the facility. So we had no choice. So this is a army facility where they have quite a few army men there. So we had to hand those Sikhs to them, and I said, what came of them? And they said they were lynched and they were brutally killed. That's what is going to happen to you. So I said, you would still not protect me. They said, our hands are tied, we cannot do that. I said, so tell me what can I do? They said, only civilian police can help you. We cannot, because you are a civilian, they can help you. Somebody who was the chief of police in that area, related to the railway function. So he sat with me, and I told him my story, and he said, unfortunately, Sardarji, I cannot help you. I cannot give you shelter because our own facility will be in danger, just as the army facility would be in danger. So it's a long conversation. Nothing came out of it. And then he did something which I had not expected from a police chief. So he looked at me and he said, you know what to do. I said, I do. He was not clear, I still understood it. So he made the gesture of scissors. He said, have you given any thought to that? I said, I had the whole night to think about it. While I was doing my own last prayer, I was thinking about it. Before that, I thought about it. I thought about it while I have been pleading for my life, whole night with the army facility. So he said, are you married? I said, yes. He said, there is a solution for you. I said, yes. He said, you were coming from Hyderabad and going to Delhi. I said, yes. He said, another train from that direction is coming and it's going to Delhi. You were going to Delhi, why don't you take that train and go to Delhi? I said, I've heard what's happening at Delhi. Is that true? He said, yes. I said, so that would be my fate. And he said, सरदार जी जो आपके भाग्य में लिखा है उसमें मैं कैसे इंटरफेयर कर सकता हूँ? How can I interfere in what's written in your destiny? That's your destiny. So then that was about the end of the conversation. So then we got up and we shook hands, and he again said the same thing. He said, think about what I said. So he was basically talking about my cutting my hair. He said, think about what I said. And I said, thank you very much. Very politely, I said, I have thought about it. And he said, think again. And I said, I would. Then I saw somebody come there who seemed to be really very serious, very senior. And everybody was, behaving like, I didn't know what the rank is. So then I took a decision. I took a gamble. I thought to myself that I'm going to be killed in any case. So I'm going to take a risk. They would hold me at the maximum, they can shoot me, which may be simpler than going through a lynching. I just ran to the person. I ignored everybody, I just ran to him. And he was a little bit startled, and he said, "What's happening? What can I do for you?" So I told him my story. And he thought about it and he said, "All right." Then he instructed one of his persons to allow me to, take me to their base, barracks. So they put me up there for 2 days, and then they said we cannot do more than that. So then they took us, there were a couple of other families, to the Gwalior Gurdwara on the top of the hill. The Gurdwara was already at that time housing, I would say, about 150 to 200 Sikhs who had gone through similar situation either in the city or otherwise. So I was there for a few days. After that, people there, when things calmed down a little bit, arranged for our travel back to our house. So I was at my house after I think a total of about 9 or 10 days. When I was at the Gwalior base, I sent an urgent telegram. There used to be a system called lightning telegram, which is supposed to reach early, right away. It took several days. So they got that telegram a day before I was to reach there. Until then, they had no idea. My personal research funding grant, which was from the Department of Science and Technology, would have been 3.5 times the largest grant anybody had in the university, even our head of department. I had subsequent to that, soon after that, was awarded the University Grants Commission Career Award. I had this possibility of doing, starting a completely new division and being the head of that at this institution. So I had all this going for me, but there was the issue was, would I be safe after this happened? Multifaceted. It was not only my life, it was my children's life. Also, people said Hyderabad was a safe place throughout your life. And if flash ahead from that point, I was in America when we heard about Rajiv Gandhi being assassinated, and the first thing that came in all of our minds was what is going to happen to Sikhs. Even before the news came who killed him, people would think it would be Sikhs, and so I mean, this was much before that, but the idea was clear that do you want to live in fear all the time? So then I started exploring the possibility of coming to this country, and I moved here in October '85. I left everything the time that the incident in Bidar, Karnataka occurred, and many people don't even know about that. That was a clear indication that it was not a one-time issue. The level was not the same as in '84, but all the hallmarks were there. All the hallmarks. So there was no point I was going to subject my family to that. A lot of things flashed across my mind. It's amazing how quickly you can think over how many different aspects, and what will happen to me if I get brain damage, and what will happen to me when I die. How would my family even know? Would they keep searching for me for 20 years? Somebody say, we saw somebody like him in whatever place, and so on. Fortunately, I've not had any effect of that, as far as I can tell. What did stay with me was what I heard about what was done to women Sikh women at that time. Very brutally gang raped, and Sikh girls and women and so on. That stayed with me as a thought of what can be done to address violence against women in general, not just Sikhs, because all over the world, in times of conflict like this, women are the main target. Addressing violence against women has stayed with me, and I have always hoped that people can do something about it. Personally, at my own level, I don't think I have had any effect, not that I can recognize. Not for a while. The first time my daughter came across this was when she was in the 9th grade, and at a Sikh children camp, Sikh youth camp, somebody presented some slides, and at the end of that she said she doesn't believe any of it because this is the 20th century. How could this be happening and the world not knowing? She basically was disbelieving. The person who was presenting it said, look, these are real slides. She kept on insisting. My wife stood up and she said, no, this happened with your dad. And she was totally taken aback. She was stunned, and she said, why didn't you tell me this? So she talked to me later on, and I told her, I said, look, here is my advice to you. I'll tell you what, I told her what had happened with me. I said, but here is my advice to you. Don't go just by what I'm telling you. This is just one person's story. Do your own research. And don't just go by one or two pieces of information. Go and do a rigorous research. So being in the field of science, I could tell her how careful she has to be and so on. So what she then did was, she had when she took a course in European history in her school, the teacher gave her a project. She said, write anything, pick up anything from the European history and write on it. She went to the teacher. She said, can I write on something from India? And the teacher said, this is a European history class. How could you do that? She said, no, there is something almost nobody knows, and I think this will be of interest to you. The teacher said, okay, tell me what it is. She told her. Teacher said, go ahead and write. She wrote. The teacher really appreciated that. By that time, my daughter had several hundred, probably several thousand pages highlighted, all over the pages. Then I suggested, I said, why don't you write a book? And she took that challenge in the high school. And the book she wrote, one thing which I insisted, and she was very aware of that, she made sure that whatever she writes there is documented. She gave a lot of citations and so on. So this was the first time we brought it up to our children. Offhand, what I can say is, don't ignore what happened. Not just for the sake of your parents or other elders who have gone through it, not just for the sake of Sikhs, not just for the sake of what happens in India in general, but for the sake of humanity at large. When these things are ignored, they happen again and again. Without going into details, all of us know what happened in India in other times, whether it's in Gujarat or other places. I went to visit India in '93, Darfur, Rwanda, and what's happening in many other places. I think it's our duty to keep these things in mind and work for harmony in the world in general. We cannot bring back people who have died. We cannot address some of the concerns that are not addressable now. But people who are still alive and their lives are still completely destroyed, and then they are living. all the widows that are still there. We should do something about them. We should try to help them, not in a way of bitterness, not in a way of hate, but in a way of helping people and in a way of bringing harmony to the country, where we have born, and we were born, and we were brought up. If harmony can be brought in our country, if harmony can be brought in other places in the world, we should do whatever we can.